in the fall, closing was hog killing time, and my mother getting involved in taking care of all the pork because we had to have 8 hogs during the summer to feed the garbage to from the dining room. And so they would keep 2 hogs in the fall to kill for hog killing time. And Mother was busy curing hams and making scrapple and taking care of all that meat. And also in the fall, one of the big activities was to make applesauce and have it canned in these great big number 10 size cans. And they would use that applesauce to feed the campers all summer. And that was a big fall activity up in the kitchen. They would hire extra people to go up there and make this applesauce and can it. And we lived off of applesauce all winter, and then the campers lived off of it all summer. Camp was built on an apple orchard, so we had a lot of apple trees left there, which gradually got cut down. But there was a professional apple orchard up the road from camp at Blackberry Inn, and they would buy bushels and bushels of apples from that apple orchard. Dad took the month of October off for his 1 month of vacation time. And that was a special time for him to read. He loved to read and to roam around in the woods and to go out and look for more log cabins if he wanted to bring some in, like Nasi Tawi, the Indian lore cabin, was one of the later buys, and the Hoffman cabin was one of the later buys. And so I spent some time with him like that. The wintertime at Sequoyah was interesting because we had the dam, the water coming over the dam would freeze and make great big long icicles all the way from the top down to the ground. And my brother Bill loved to break off those big icicles, and they were like swords, and he enjoyed breaking them off and bringing them down to the house. And sometimes we even used ice to make ice cream in a churn, from the ice from the dam, and especially when we couldn't go to school. For me, in the dining hall, and I guess for my brother Bill too, we would push all the tables over to one side in the dining room, and I would skate. I used it as a skating rink. And then we had made a little basket for basketball at one end too. And so it became a play area for us. Bill and I played with a sled a lot because we would ride the sled all the way from the dining hall down the lawn to our house. And that was a good little place to ride. And my older brother Harold was in Alaska when I was a teenager. And he sent me a pair of ice skates with the shoe on it. Before that, Dad bought us ice skates that had to be clamped onto our shoes. And that's what I started out trying to learn to ice skate on, but they were hard to use. So when I got the shoe skates, I learned how to ice skate better. We skated where the new pool was built over on the side, which is where they taught boys how to swim later. And before that pool was built about 1945. They had to rebuild the dam, and then they built that swimming pool. And before that, I would get on the lake. We had to be sure the ice was thick enough, of course. And sometimes back in those days, it did get very thick. And I would play on the big ice, the big lake part. But later, I would ice skate over on the pool. We did not have any heat in the house for years, except for the fireplace in the living room. So we always dressed by the fire, and the fire was our source of heat mostly. And then the kitchen had a little tiny wood stove. I remember it was my job to bring in the stove wood for that stove. A cook stove? No, it was not a cook stove. It was about this big, about that high, just for heat. It was to heat the kitchen. And then behind the kitchen was what we called the pantry, and it stayed cold. And we wanted it cold because we could keep food there. And the ice box, when I was little, and all, kept food in the pantry. And then later a refrigerator. When I was real young, we had a wood stove to cook on, old-fashioned wood stove, you know. And then finally my mother got an electric stove. So mother really did live like a pioneer for a long time. Yeah. And I can remember in the wintertime it was so cold we didn't want to take a bath except about once a week. You know, every Saturday night or once a week. Oh, those were the days I can remember counting how many blankets were on my bed one night. I had 9 blankets on my bed. I could hardly turn over. And mother would, when we were young enough, she would hold a blanket up by the fireplace to get the blanket warm, and then she would wrap my legs up in it when she put me in bed. I think when I was maybe 10, they got little gas heaters, little Powerfax gas heaters they put in some of the bedrooms. And we didn't have a furnace, I think, until I was a senior in high school or in college. And finally, when they closed in the downstairs and made a basement there, we finally got a furnace. Penland home, they call that the Beaches because it became a bed and breakfast inn. So a lot of people love to go there, and especially parents of campers could spend the night and eat there too. And Mrs. Penland, his wife, ran it, but it became a bed and breakfast because my mother first started that. Because when I was 9 years old, she sent me to camp in Tennessee, near Nashville, Tennessee, and she wanted to make money to buy a refrigerator because she didn't have an electric refrigerator. We just had an ice box. And so she decided to rent. I think she rented that whole big house. And so she started bed and breakfast in there and had my grandmother help her and my great aunt help her. And so they cooked food and had a lot of people to come out there to eat. And so she made enough money that summer running that to buy a refrigerator by the time I got home from camp. And so she had to get rid of me so she wouldn't have to take care of me and all. But that was a wonderful experience for me too, to go to camp. And I was just 9 years old, and I stayed out there for about 8 weeks at an early age. But I was so used to being in camp anyway, it wasn't very different, except that I was with girls for the first time instead of boys. So that was a new experience. When I became older, like a real old teenager, I went squirrel hunting by myself one morning. And I can remember I went up to, I got a gun at the rifle range and went up to the retreat, you know, up above the council ring. There's a log cabin up there near the council ring that later had to become the craft shop because the craft shop burned down when Eustace, my son, was there. Anyway, I can remember seeing a squirrel up on a limb and on a hemlock tree or something. And I weakened. I said, I don't want to kill that squirrel. I don't want to have to mess with it or anything. So I didn't even shoot at it. And I don't know, I probably wouldn't have hit it if I shot it, but I did learn how to shoot a rifle pretty good and enjoyed it. I just did everything. I don't think there's anything I learned to build fires. I built me a little fire in the backyard by myself when I was a little girl and cooked an egg, froggy in the egg. You know what? You put a piece of bread, you take a little hole out, and you drop the egg in the froggy in the hole or something like that, or a target. Anyway, I tried everything.